For thousands of years, chocolate wasn't sweet. It wasn't a treat. It wasn't a gift. It was a bitter, spiced, blood-red drink, a euro, reserved for kings, warriors, and gods. In one civilization, it was worth more than gold. Literally, people paid their taxes in it. Soldiers were paid in it. You could be executed for stealing it. And the story of how that sacred bitter drink became the candy bar in your pocket involves a stolen empire, a conquistador who lied to a king's face, a colonial trade built entirely on slavery, and a child labor crisis that is still happening right now in 2026 on the exact farms that grow the chocolate you probably ate this week. This is the history of chocolate. Almost none of what you think you know about it is the full story. Let's start at the beginning. Around 1900 BC, in the humid tropical lowlands of what is now southern Mexico and Central America, ancient peoples discovered something growing wild in the rainforest canopy. The cacao tree, its trunk studded with strange football-shaped pods, each one packed with bitter purple-white seeds. The Olmec civilization, a euro, one of the very first complex societies in the Americas, predating even the Maya, a euro, were likely the first people on Earth to ferment, roast, and grind those seeds into a drink. Archaeologists have found traces of theobromine, a chemical compound unique to cacao, on pottery vessels from Olmec sites dating back over 3,000 years. But it was the Maya, centuries later, who turned chocolate into something close to sacred. Maya chocolate looked and tasted nothing like what you're picturing right now. It was mixed with chili peppers, cornmeal, and water, sometimes flavored with vanilla or flowers, then poured back and forth between two vessels from a height, over and over, to whip up a thick, prized foam on top. It was served warm or at room temperature, a euro, spicy, bitter, and intense. And it was not for everyone. Maya nobility and priests drank chocolate at royal weddings, funerals, and religious ceremonies. Cacao appears throughout Maya art, painted on pottery alongside gods, kings, and sacrificial rituals. The Maya believed cacao was a literal gift from the gods, so sacred that cacao pods were sometimes buried alongside royalty, meant to accompany them into the afterlife. Even the harvest itself carried religious weight. Farmers performed ceremonies before planting cacao trees, asking for blessing and protection, treating the crop less like agriculture and more like something borrowed from the divine. By the 1400s, the Aztec Empire, centered in the Valley of Mexico, had inherited the cacao obsession from earlier civilizations, a euro, but they took it somewhere no society had gone before. They turned it into money. Cacao beans became actual, functioning currency across the Aztec Empire, used to buy goods in bustling marketplaces. Historical Spanish records describe the going exchange rates in astonishing detail. A single turkey cost around 100 cacao beans. A rabbit was worth roughly 10. A slave could reportedly be purchased for around 100 beans. It was real money, and like all real money, it attracted fraud, a euro. Spanish chroniclers documented Aztec citizens counterfeiting cacao currency by carefully hollowing out beans and refilling them with sand, clay, or avocado skin to pass as the real thing. One of the earliest documented cases of currency counterfeiting in human history, built entirely around chocolate. Emperor Moctezuma II reportedly drank dozens of cups of chocolate every single day, served to him in pure gold goblets that were used exactly once and then thrown away or given as gifts, never reused. The Aztecs called the drink zacatl, a euro, bitter water, a euro, and many historians believe this is where our modern word chocolate ultimately comes from. But here's the detail almost nobody knows, the one that's about to become critically important. The Aztec capital itself sat in a highland valley, far too cold and dry to grow cacao. Every single bean the empire consumed had to be imported as tribute, extracted from conquered territories hundreds of miles away in hotter, wetter regions. That meant the empire's entire chocolate supply, a euro, its currency, its religion, its royal ritual, a euro, depended completely on holding onto distant lands by force. That dependency is about to collide with a stranger who just landed on the coast. In 1519, Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés copyright S landed on the coast of what is now Mexico with a small force of soldiers and marched inland toward the heart of the Aztec Empire. According to widely repeated historical accounts, Moctezuma may have initially believed Cortés copyright S was connected to Quetzalcoatl, a major Aztec deity, a euro, the very same god closely. associated with the origin of cacao itself according to Aztec mythology. Whether or not that belief drove his early decisions, Moctezuma welcomed Cortés into the capital, Tenochtitlan, and served him chocolate as an honored guest. Cortés recognized its value immediately a not as a sacred drink, but as a commodity he could exploit. He later wrote to the Spanish crown describing cacao as valuable enough to function as currency, urging that it be taken seriously as a trade good. Within 2 years, through a brutal combination of military alliances with rival indigenous groups, devastating European disease, and outright betrayal, Cortés had helped orchestrate the complete collapse of the Aztec Empire. Millions died, largely from smallpox and other diseases the Spanish unknowingly carried. One of the most sophisticated, wealthiest civilizations in the entire Western Hemisphere was destroyed within a generation. And when Cortés eventually sailed back to Spain, he didn't just bring gold and silver. He brought cacao beans and the knowledge of how to prepare the drink a setting off a chain of events that would eventually reshape diets, economies, and human suffering across 3 continents. If stories like this are your kind of thing, hit subscribe a. We drop a new hidden history of food and drink every single week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Chocolate arrived in Spain in the mid-1500s, and Spanish colonists made one critical, world-altering change to the recipe. They added sugar and often cinnamon, stripping out the chili and cornmeal the Maya and Aztec had used. The result was something entirely new, a sweet, rich, and instantly addictive to European palates. For nearly a century, Spain guarded the recipe almost as a state secret, restricting its spread, keeping the enormous profits to itself. By the 1600s, the secret leaked out through royal marriages and diplomatic gifts, and chocolate exploded across European aristocracy. It became wildly fashionable in France, England, Italy, and the Netherlands. A served hot and sweetened, sipped from ornate porcelain cups by nobility who could afford almost nothing else exotic. Chocolate houses began opening across London in the 1650s, operating almost like exclusive private clubs, where wealthy men gathered to drink, gossip, gamble, and discuss politics. Some of these chocolate houses would later evolve directly into London's earliest stock exchanges and gentlemen's clubs. There was just one enormous, unavoidable problem hiding underneath the fashion trend a the exact same problem that would later haunt sugar and tea. Cacao trees only grow in a narrow tropical band close to the equator, in hot, humid conditions. You cannot grow cacao in Spain. You cannot grow it in England or France. European demand for chocolate was about to collide head-on with a supply chain that could only be filled through brutal, large-scale labor in distant tropical colonies. And by this point in history, Europe already had a well-established, horrifying method for solving exactly that kind of labor problem. As European demand for chocolate and sugar surged together through the 1600s and 1700s, colonial powers began establishing cacao plantations across the Caribbean, Central and South America, and eventually West Africa. Cacao cultivation is grueling, precise work. The pods have to be cut down carefully by hand using machetes without damaging the tree, split open, and the beans inside fermented under banana leaves for several days before being dried in the sun. A labor-intensive process at every single stage, performed in punishing tropical heat. Spain and later Portuguese, French, and Dutch colonizers filled this labor demand the same brutal way they filled it on sugar plantations, through the forced labor of enslaved indigenous populations and increasingly enslaved Africans transported across the Atlantic. Entire plantation economies in colonial Venezuela, Ecuador, Brazil, and eventually the Portuguese island colonies of Cepão, Toma Copyright, and Principe off the coast of West Africa were built directly on slavery, producing the cacao that filled increasingly fashionable European chocolate cups. By the 1700s, cacao had become deeply woven into the same transatlantic economic machine as sugar. Ships carrying manufactured goods to Africa, enslaved people from Africa to the Americas, and cacao and sugar from the Americas back to Europe. Chocolate's rise as a beloved luxury in polished European drawing rooms and the horror of the transatlantic slave trade were never two separate stories. They were the same story, funded by the same money, happening at the exact same time. For roughly 300 years after Cortés first brought it back to Spain, chocolate remained almost exclusively a drink. The solid chocolate bar sitting in your kitchen right now simply didn't exist yet. That changed in 1828, when Dutch chemist Coenraad van Houten patented a hydraulic press capable of separating cacao butter from cacao solids. This single invention made chocolate dramatically cheaper, more stable, and far easier to mass-produce than ever before a euro, and it created a valuable byproduct, pure cacao butter, that would soon change everything. In 1847, the British company J.S. Fry & Sons combined cacao powder, sugar, and melted cacao butter to create the first solid, moldable eating chocolate bar in history. Then in 1875, Swiss chocolatier Daniel Peter spent years experimenting before successfully combining chocolate with condensed milk powder, inventing milk chocolate, a euro smoother, creamier, and instantly more appealing to a mass audience than the bitter dark chocolate before it. And in America, one relentless businessman was about to turn chocolate from a rare luxury into an everyday product for millions of ordinary working people. Milton Hershey built his first candy business, failed completely, went bankrupt, and rebuilt his career from scratch twice more before finding success. In 1900, he sold his profitable caramel company for a fortune and poured every dollar into mass-producing milk chocolate using industrial manufacturing techniques nobody else in America had figured out yet. He built an entire company town around his factory in rural Pennsylvania, a euro, literally named Hershey a euro, complete with worker housing, schools, a park, and its own trolley system. By the early 1900s, the 5-cent Hershey bar had done something no one had managed before. It turned chocolate from a rare treat only the wealthy could afford into something an ordinary American factory worker could buy on a whim. Chocolate's next transformation came from an unlikely source: war. During both World War I and World War II, the United States military identified chocolate as an essential ration item, a euro compact, high in calories, and capable of boosting troop morale in brutal conditions. The U.S. Army commissioned Hershey to develop a special heat-resistant Ration D chocolate bar, engineered deliberately to taste only slightly better than a boiled potato, so soldiers wouldn't be tempted to eat their emergency rations for pleasure. Millions of American soldiers carried chocolate bars overseas during the war, and when they came home, many brought their new chocolate habit with them. Post-war chocolate consumption in America surged, cementing candy bars as a permanent fixture of everyday life rather than an occasional treat. Today, the global chocolate industry is worth well over $130 billion a year. The average American eats somewhere between 9 and 11 pounds of chocolate annually. And here is the uncomfortable truth this entire video has been building toward. Roughly 70% of the world's cacao today comes from West Africa, primarily Ivory Coast and Ghana, a euro, and investigations by journalists, the U.S. Department of Labor and international watchdog organizations have repeatedly documented widespread child labor on cacao farms across this exact region, including children working with machetes and dangerous pesticides, some of them trafficked from neighboring countries, many of them never having tasted the finished chocolate their labor produces. Major global chocolate companies signed a formal pledge back in 2001 promising to eliminate the worst forms of child labor from their cacao supply chains within a matter of years. As of the most recent independent reporting, more than 2 decades later, that problem still has not been solved. There has been pushback. Fair trade certification programs emerged in the 1990s and 2000s specifically to address this, promising farmers guaranteed minimum prices and stricter labor standards in exchange for a certification label on the final product. Some chocolate companies have built their entire brand identity around these direct trade relationships, paying farmers well above market rate and publishing supply chain audits. But fair trade and direct trade chocolate still represents a small fraction of total global production. The vast majority of chocolate sold in ordinary supermarkets, a euro, the bars, the candy, the baking chips, a euro, still moves through supply chains where full traceability back to a single farm is difficult or impossible to verify. Cacao from thousands of small farms gets mixed together at regional collection points long before it ever reaches a factory, which means even companies with good intentions often cannot fully guarantee where every bean actually came from. The same pattern that built sugar, the same pattern that built tea, now quietly built into the chocolate bar sitting in your kitchen cabinet right now. Next time you unwrap a piece of chocolate, you're holding one of the oldest, most consequential, and most quietly brutal commodities in human history, a euro. a drink once so sacred it was buried alongside kings, and today still carries a human cost most of us never think about. If this one got you, watch our video on the history of sugar next a euro, same pattern, different crop, equally dark. Subscribe if you want a new deep dive into the hidden history of food dropped every single week.